is a test on the blog. This is a blog video test. I may post this. What I'm trying to find out is if my new old microphone with a digital recorder and this camera makes a good blog equipment. This microphone that I've got clipped with a bull clip to my shirt, sorry about the cleavage, but I'm at that point in my life where I'm having this insane amount of hot flashes. It's caused by the recent surgery, but it's also caused by my age. I mean, you know, and tank top makes it a lot easier to cope because, you know, when my body goes off, it just goes off. Anyways, so I'm flashing you. Awful sorry, but it's nothing you can't find on any porn site, right? And much better ones. Alright, so try to overlook the cleavage. It's not that bad. I've seen worse. I've seen women who think that it's a professional thing to show this much cleavage. I don't, actually. I think that if you're out on a hot date and you want to impress your date, that's when it's appropriate. The rest of the time, you know, it just happens to be there in this case. Hot summer days, hot flash women, you know. So yeah, the microphone I'm using was part of a headphone that broke. No, the headphone itself was fine. It's cheap. It didn't produce very good quality sound, but the foam padding on it died of old age, as did the foam padding on the microphone. But I'm going to create a fake fur pillowcase type cover for it, like a slip cover, because I've seen that's how they make the anti-wind ones. They just sew up a bit of fake fur, and I just haven't done that yet today because I've been doing this. So I've got it clipped on with a bull clip. I carefully disassembled it from the headphones piece by piece. And I was really pleased not to have to solder, but I did have to cut some plastic up. But I was sacrificing the plastic in it. So, it's a dishes vlog from a different perspective. I've got a digital recorder that I picked up, hanging off of my waistband. And I've used a bull clip to clip the microphone, which used to be one of those mouse booms. And we'll just see how this works. If I like it, I'll post it. If I don't like it, I'll throw it out. If you're watching it, well, you are watching it, right? So therefore, I liked it and I posted it. Of course, it's also possible I said the heck with it and posted it without even bothering to watch it. You probably have noticed that most of my vlog posts, VLOG, are posted with apparently no editing, supervising, overlooking, and that's true. I don't proofread my blog posts. I go, good, thank you, it's done, send. I don't watch it over again. I think most people suffer from this. I'm not real comfortable with seeing myself on camera and listening to myself. I'm not uncomfortable with it, but it's like I was there, I remember it, I don't need to go over it again kind of thing. It seems like, gee, that's a lot of time to spend listening to something I just finished saying. And who really cares anyway? No one's watching my channel. Things that I learned this week. I spend a lot of time on the TV watching with the Roku. Right now it's on Netflix. I spend enough time that I've actually run out of things to watch on YouTube. Now, you could argue that there's more out there that I haven't discovered, and you would be right. But what I mean when I say I've run out is that the topics that interest me are now presenting stuff that's a year or 2 years old, and very often that I've already seen. The channels I follow, I've watched all of their latest uploads, and I've caught up with all their old stuff and or don't want to catch up with it. And we're getting to the point now where finding stuff to watch means watching stuff I'm not interested in, like how to patch your tire and how to paint your face and why the planet that's hiding behind the sun is responsible for global warming, not the oil companies. No, I'm not going to get into that, because if you believe it, nothing I say will change your mind, and if you know better, I have nothing to say to you. I will simply say this. If you bother to pay any attention to astrophysics and math, the whole idea that there's a giant planet hiding behind the sun, powerful enough to disrupt our axis, as well as our magnetic poles and climate and geostability, the idea that there is a gravitational mass that large hiding behind the sun, and we only discovered it in the year 2000 and or maybe the 20th century, is beyond absurd. And then to say, well, no, it's there in the ancient writings. No, actually it's not. They did not edit my education that much. They did not edit all of the sets of encyclopedias I read. They did not edit all of the science fiction books I read. There is stuff that goes back to a time before the global nationalists started editing our media and editing our access to information. And yet none of that stuff mentions this planet. In fact, the only thing prior to this year that ever mentioned a sister planet, and I'm calling it a sister planet because apparently it's in synchronous orbit, except not quite completely synchronous. It's just asynchronous enough that it's going to run into us, only it's not going to hit us, it's going to graze by and screw us up. Looks like I'm talking about the planet Nibiru in this blog, and you know what? That feels good. That's fun. I'm going to tell you all about the planet Nibiru from my point of view, my opinion of it, my educated opinion. I'm not an astrophysicist, but I am a science nerd. I have done a lot of reading in my life, more than you can fathom. I used to have this wall of books that represented about 20% of what I had read in life. Because it couldn't include the encyclopedias at the back of every classroom I ever went to on account of. I was done with the schoolwork so early. I mean, I finished the textbook for the year that first week, and then I would be sitting there bored silly while the teacher repeated herself for people who'd forgotten 5 minutes later what I'd already learned. And so the teachers would let me, actually permit me, to sneak to the back of the class and quietly sit there reading the encyclopedia while I kept one ear tuned to the teacher's lecture just in case there was something I'd missed. Seriously, I was that smart. And it's not egotism to say I was that smart. It's a recognition that I was. If I had been a boy, they'd have fast-tracked me to university. I probably would have been one of those kids you hear about that graduated university before others had gotten to high school. However, I wasn't. I was a cute little girl and somewhat annoying, and my role in life was to serve other people, to be a service industry person of some sort, whether that's sex industry or a housewife or a waitress or a nurse or a salesperson. That was my role in life, and that was the only role that was appropriate to me. And if I grew up big, fat, and ugly, well, heck, I could try some of the male trades, like, simple stuff that women could understand, like, as long as I had someone to repair it for me. Maybe I could learn to operate a truck. Maybe I could learn to dig a ditch, if I was big and beefy enough. That was the attitude towards women. So my intelligence was not only not capitalized on and not recognized, but actually I was shamed for acknowledging it, shamed for speaking of it, and I still am. I still get shamed for thinking that I'm smarter than anyone else. And I'm not smarter than everyone else, but I am smarter than average. And I have learned enough about astrophysics to be able to say with complete certainty that the math does not follow that there is a giant gravitational mass hiding just behind the sun. I've also read enough to be able to tell you that none of the ancient astronomers, not the Egyptians, not the Druids, oh my goodness, yes, I have read that stuff. I spent a couple of years researching pagan history, Druidic history. I've spent a couple of years, including in universities, studying ancient history, ancient mythology. I have studied the old masters. Seriously, I really have. I'm not making this stuff up to make myself look good, because I know it doesn't make me look good. Believe me, I've been humbled. It's been explained to me quite clearly that I'm not allowed to be smart, and I'm not allowed to know things, and I sure as heck aren't supposed to think that I know things when I'm smart. And yet, somehow, here I am, still knowing what I know. And knowing that my sources were good and solid, and that my information was good. And I even studied Latin so I could learn some of this stuff firsthand. Should have studied Greek? Up yours. So, None of them have ever mentioned this sister planet. Not even when they were sitting down calculating and figuring out that there was a mystery planet out beyond the planet of the gas giants. You know, there's all these, and I have forgotten the exact order of the planets. Even though I did a science project in grade school on the solar system, I've actually forgotten the order of the planets because that's not relevant information to me. That's the kind of data you can look up on Google, so it wasn't worth sparing time in my brain. And maybe that's one of the reasons my brain does what it does, because it isn't burdened down by detailed data about, you know, what day someone said something and what his name was, or what the numbers specifically were in the equation. So they can calculate based on observations of orbits and rotation. They can actually calculate how many planets there are and how big the mass of those planets are. It's how they're finding exoplanets and other stars. They actually can see the wobble in the star's orbit and go, oh, look, this wobble indicates that this star has bodies orbiting it. It has this many bodies and they have this much mass. I kid you not. They can do that with the math. They did that with the solar system, like back when they were using their fingers to count on, and little stones and little... Do you know what an abacus is? An abacus is a vertical device with a horizontal grid of rods on which are counted series of beads. And it's like counting on your fingers, except you've got a row for the ones place, a row for the tens place, and so forth. Whereas with your hands, once you get to 10, you have to remember or mark down the count. Well, on the abacus, you just slide a bead over and begin counting again, and slide a bead over. Yeah, you just slide the beads back and forth to keep track of your numbers as you do your math. And these guys were able, with that kind of primitive calculator, they were actually able to calculate things like the fact that, oh, this orbit isn't clean. It's being affected by the mass of another planetary body that we can't see with our telescopes. They discovered Pluto long before they could see it. And then, of course, they started looking for it and refining their telescopes until they did see it. And now I know that Pluto's been demoted as a planet. It's more like a sort of an asteroid. In fact, I'm not sure if it got there seems to be some conversation still going on as to whether or not we should allow Pluto to be a planet. It's not really big enough, but it's got that kind of orbit, but then so do the asteroids, but it's not in the asteroid belt, and yada yada bullshit. You know, and that's the kind of stuff that I don't think is terribly relevant. Is it a planet? Isn't it a planet? Is it a planetoid? What do we name it? Who cares? It's there, and it affects the orbit of the other planets. They figured out Mercury was there because there was a blip of a shadow on the sun, and because it affected the orbit of Venus. Which you can see with the naked eye. So there's no question Venus exists. Now, this planet Nibiru would therefore have had a gravitational effect on the Sun, the Earth, Venus, Mercury, and frankly, all of the other planets. It would have had a gravitational effect. It would have been described as Planet X. They would have known whereabouts in the solar system it should exist. So even if it had hidden behind the Sun for all of Earth's history, someone would have calculated that it was there. But they didn't. Nope. It's never been mentioned. So the math alone says there is no giant planet come screaming around the sun to hit us. Now here's another thought. Again, based on the fact that nobody ever mentioned it, and I refuse to believe that my education's been edited as far back as 1963, including encyclopedias that go back to the 19th century, including all of the writings I ever dug up and read had been edited at the publisher's level to make sure they omitted all references of this planet, because why? Think about that. When did they decide to edit out this mystery planet, and why? I mean, in the 21st century, we might say, oh, they're keeping it from us because they don't want us to panic. They're keeping it from us because they're putting a settlement on it for just the privileged few, and they don't want us to interfere with that. But that plan would not have been in place in, say, 18 75? I mean, come on, really? They already dreamed of rocket ships. Yeah, they did have rocket ship dreams. Kinda. But, I mean, they still thought the moon was something you could walk on. And let's face it, a gas giant up there, if it was actually an M-class planet capable of holding us as life, by now, life would have evolved there. I'm sorry, but it would have. And we'd have been picking up signs of life from it. We would have been picking up electromagnetic frequencies. We'd have been picking up something. So, it's not a habitable planet if it was there. So, it's going to come screaming around from behind the sun and graze us, right? That means that its orbit is not perfectly synchronous with Earth's orbit. That once every so many period of time, be it days, months, weeks, years, thousands of years, millennia, once every so often, it's going to come around from behind the sun and graze Earth. Is that what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs? Oh wait, we've already determined through geographic evidence that it was asteroids. Oh, they broke off the planet because of the intense pull. No, that would have eliminated all life on Earth. The scene that my dear husband describes after having watched countless videos on this planet, and my ex-BFF who decided that I was insulting him and calling him stupid when I told him that observing lens flares and deciding that they prove there's a planet over there behind the sun was the same thing as calling him stupid. I said, huh. Yeah, he posted up this video of a lens flare. A lens flare. A lens flare is caused by the fact that there is more than one piece of glass in your camera lens, and light comes in through the first piece, hits the second piece, some of it bounces off, hits the first piece on the back, bounces back down again into your camera lens, and you get a reflection of the light source outside your camera, which is not exactly lined up with the original light source, creating what's called a lens flare. And these things, depending on how many lenses are in your camera, depending on the angle of the light source, depending on the type of light source, there's a variety of ways they can show up. Sometimes they're really beautiful, and these days you can actually download digital lens flares and apply them to your photographs to create that effect, and your videos in editing software. So there's a million lens flares out there, lens flare videos of the sunset showing this mysterious planet suddenly peeking out from behind the sun for the first time in history, in written history, in human history. Not even the ancient Mycenaeans. I mean, that's the oldest civilization of which there is any evidence. Not even they showed any sign of this giant planet peeking out from behind the sun. And believe me, if it's behind the sun, it would have to be awfully big to be even almost as big as the sun, as those lens flares are. I mean, I'm sorry, but for it to be that big and that glowing, it would actually be a binary star. And it's just, it's so frustrating to me to be unable to explain this to my husband when he gets arguing. And I don't think that he's arguing for the planet because he, I don't know, spends an awful lot of time studying it. He seems to really care. It certainly has got his attention. Sometimes it seems like he brings it up because he knows that it annoys me, and it's his goal in life to get an emotional reaction from me. Like the characters on Star Trek are constantly hassling and picking at the Vulcans because they want to prove that the Vulcans don't have emotional self-control like they claim they do. And it's like, are you kidding me? He spent 30 years learning to be emotionally controlled, and you're going to, through rude behavior, you're going to spoil that for him for a day, and then prove that those 30 years of study and exercise and meditation were a waste of time because he's just as volatile as everyone else. What is it with that seems to be an American thing. Yeah. See, the American population has been subject to a grand social direction experiment for about 60 years. It might have started, I think it started in the 50s. somewhere in the 40s and 50s when they first started realizing that in media first started becoming a public thing. I mean, it's pretty damned hard to influence your society with books when most of them don't read. Even if they can read, they're busy working. But man, when television came along and all of a sudden you could actually get 4 hours of their mental time every single night, that's power, man. So they started interfering with the media. They started purchasing television stations and movie theaters and corporations started owning media production houses. They started telling artists what to produce by financing the ones they wanted and definancing the ones they didn't. And when necessary, using blacklisting and social control to dump the ones that weren't complying with the agenda, which was to stupefy the American population by any means necessary, to disempower, separate, and stupefy them. And I think the planet Nibiri is part of all of that. And the purpose of the planet Nibiri myth is to get to all of those people who previously have been good little consumers, running their vehicles, buying their large engines, using lots of oil and gas, using lots of plastic, using lots of corporate production stuff. The folks who don't stop to think very much and therefore have never really gotten the ecological message, to convince them in the face of overwhelming evidence that there's nothing they can do about climate change, because it's no longer possible to convince them that climate change isn't real. Some of you out there still think climate change isn't real, but most of you are starting to go, well, I don't know about global warming and I don't know about that stuff, but I can kind of tell that the geese are around in January and that's not normal. And like these beaches, they're much smaller than they used to be. They're flooding, and look at all the dead trees. And, people are starting to realize that climate change is real. So now, instead of trying to deny climate change, the corporations who are largely responsible for it and largely causing more of it and don't want to quit doing what they're doing, now come up with this groovy idea that it's a planet out there over which we have no control that is going to kill us all. That's the point of the planet Nibiri. So this mind control thing, the purpose of the mind control thing is wage slavery. For you to feel like if you lose your job, all hope is lost, and therefore you must do whatever it takes to keep your job or to get a job, to slot yourself into the nice corporate agenda and become good corporate little consumers, and go home and assuage your disquiet, your ill-ease, your unhappiness with more McDonald's French fries, more 7-Eleven Big Gulps, more plastic toys. And all it really does is it drives this corporate production model that sees China polluting itself to death and exploiting its workers, and America becoming nothing more than a service industry trying to earn enough money to keep China employed, so that the corporations can tick over one more bead on their abacus of wealth. So that a few people who are mentally bent on becoming wealthier with each passing day can continue to feed their insane addiction to the numbers, their addiction to money. It's really gotten quite out of hand. What do you do about it? Turn on, tune out, drop out. Actually, stop entirely. Face your fears. Find your courage. Launch yourself into a different lifestyle. There's a lot of people going off grid. Now, some of them are doing it because they're terrified of the future. Others are doing it because they're terrified of the present. They recognize that the current lifestyle and stuff addiction is toxic and it's killing us all. And they don't want to be sick and die. They don't want to get cancer from the water. They don't want to get cancer from their toys. They don't want to find themselves so stressed out trying to pay for it all that they get cancer and other diseases from stress. And they recognize it, so they're dropping out. And so off-grid is one of the places where people are finding a solution. You don't have to go off-grid, and you don't have to give up electricity, and you don't have to give up running water, and you don't have to give up a hot bath. But, you know, you might have to give up finishing that collection that you're working on. You might have to give up impressing people with your amazing home theater. You might have to give up that chase to beat the Joneses at their own game. You may have to give up social status in order to escape it. But those things are artificial, you see. Those are the things that the corporations have given us and trained us to value. Our social status. What will the neighbors think? Who cares what the neighbors think? If the neighbors don't think well of you, they're jerks and you don't need them. I mean, seriously, they're still going to call the fire department if there's smoke coming from your house, even if they hate you. I mean, I hate the guys across the street because they're unsociable and I'm not even going to get into it. We don't get along, we don't talk, we don't interact, and I'm angry with them for the way that they respond to me when I try to be sociable. And every now and then, in my darkest heart, I think to myself, if your house caught fire, I wouldn't call the fire department. But the truth is, I would not only call the fire department, but I'd rush in to save them. And then afterwards, I'd be like, there, see? You didn't like me, but look what a nice person I am. And that'd probably be my motivation. Well, it's pretty selfish. They'd still have their lives saved. So, you know, maybe we should stop worrying so much about motivation and worry a little more about results. And that's the thing. So who cares what the neighbors think? Really. Either they're nice people worth your concern, and therefore they understand perfectly that you're just another human being. And there goes my camera. Okie dokie. Alright, I'm going to finish this vlog without a camera and just cut in some B-roll footage. That was one of the things I learned this week, B-roll footage. You just go around and you take groovy shots of groovy things, and then you just splice them in, and you talk over top of them, and it makes your video more interesting. So anyway, stop worrying about what the neighbors think. Stop worrying about your social status. Stop worrying about your future. Start worrying about who are you, where are you, what are you doing with yourself right now. Are you happy? No, I mean, are you happy? Not are you acting cheerful and are you presenting a happy appearance, but are things really actually... Do you sleep well at night? Do you feel contented when you stop? When you stop everything for a moment, or everything stops and you're alone with your own thoughts, just sit there and go, yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm comfortable. I like the people around me. I'm not working too hard. I've got time to spend with my loved ones. I've got time to spend being creative. I'm happy. I've got stuff to be happy about. And then fine. If the answer is no at any point in that conversation, you got the disease. And Planet Nibiri, I'm sorry, dear. Just the math, the science just does not pan out. It doesn't exist. It's not in history. It's not in the math. It's not in the sky. And it's not the cause of global warming. The cause of global warming is you and me and the corporations that have been mind-fucking us for just too long. I'm sorry about the profanity. I do use profanity. I try to keep it relevant, you know. I mean, would you people please start teaching your children how to use profanity instead of just telling them not to and trying to hide it from them, because you can't hide it anymore. It's out there. They all know. I knew the words long before I even knew how to spell them, so you can't hide that. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the B-roll footage.